Well, if you're in the tourism and hospitality business, you have to be resilient, because since 2001, we've either been in decline or recovery 50% of the time.
Halifax and Nova Scotia, I think, are on the cusp of something big. We have been discovered, but there's still so much more opportunity for us.
Welcome to Place, the Tourism Industry Association of Nova Scotia's podcast. Our industry is worth $3.2 billion annually and employs over 50,000 Nova Scotians. So this podcast is designed to talk about tourism and the issues and topics that matter. Each episode, we will explore conversations that demonstrate the interconnectivity between tourism and the social, cultural, environmental health of the province. There is no place like Nova Scotia, and we want to ensure every Nova Scotia community benefits from the positive impacts that only tourism can bring.
I think tourism is important because we see it as a tool. It's a tool to share our culture and who we really are and the true story and history of our people to the world.
Nova Scotia is celebrated as a destination with culturally unique peoples and places. The province's rich history and culture provides a distinct advantage for us. However, there is a need to enhance cultural tourism product offerings. Building capacity to reflect and support Mi'kmaq, African Nova Scotia, Acadian, and Gaelic cultures is key to success. So in this episode, we will be exploring people and places. How can we leverage our cultural diversity, our heritage assets, and our unique communities to create a destination of choice?
Language is absolutely central to the cultural expression of the Gaelic people. What we're really talking about is maintaining the ethno-cultural group that we call the Gaels. My name is Lewis McKinnon. I work with the Office of Gaelic Affairs with the province of Nova Scotia. My name in Gaelic is Láithí McKinnon. I think it's an important reflection of local language and culture, whether that be for the Gaels that live in Cape Breton, and also there's some signage, Gaelic signage on the Eastern Mainland in Antigonish, Pictou, and Guysborough counties. So I think it actually reflects back to the local communities the importance of their language and giving them that sense of you're unique, and there's a reason for you to have a sense of pride in your identity.
Nova Scotia is the Gaelic-speaking heartland of North America, and we should all value the immense advantage it gives our region.
It's a very interesting aspect for those who are visiting, whether they be tourists or people visiting from maybe other parts of the province or other parts of the Atlantic Canadian region, where they realize this is really unique. There are unique communities here that have these languages and cultural expressions as part of what I would call daily living. I think that the general reaction is positive. I think that that's a fairly new development. I think that there over the years there have been attitudes that haven't been so positive around sort of the maintenance of Gaelic, and I think that raises the question of where do these attitudes come from, and I think they come from the system of colonization. That colonization ends up creating an environment where we have these thoughts about, for example, minority languages and cultures, that they're somehow less than. And that even existed amongst people of Gaelic heritage. However, I think, as I say, these attitudes are changing, and people are seeing the value of language and culture as something important to individual and community identity, that they contribute to well-being, that they contribute to a sense of connection and belonging in community. And in the case of this particular summit, there's actual economic benefit through festivals and events, as you mentioned, making Nova Scotia an attractive place for visitors to come to and have that, as I think in government speak, it would be like have that strategic advantage, something different, unique that we can promote.
Louis makes a very valid point about the historical treatment of underrepresented languages and cultures. But as the tide turns and we strive for greater inclusivity, how do we ensure all communities benefit from tourism growth?
So my name is Robert Bernard. I am the Executive Director for Nova Scotia Indigenous Tourism Enterprise Network. It's a long name, but our name is actually a Mi'kmaq name, Nsiden, N-S-I-T-E-N, which means trying to create understanding. Like, I want you to understand. So it's a traditional name that was arrived at through a dream, a vision that we had, and we were going through a process of trying to figure out what we were going to be called, and it happened that way, and it was meant to be that way. So I've been involved with the organization for about 10 years, from scratch to building a province-wide organization. I think at the start we didn't really know what we were getting into. Tourism is just that word, and thinking about how to get businesses involved. And for us, it's so much more holistic. We've been outside the box all that time, right? So we know how that is. We know how to operate that way. And we've been asking government and industry and everyone to think outside the box. So it was always the first thing that came out. Oh, we can't do it that way because policy says we got to do it this way, right? Our bylaws say we got to do it this way. We don't operate in that sense of our natural laws are what govern us.
While Robert values the economic importance of tourism, he still wants us to see the bigger picture.
Making sure that we protect the land and make sure that we implement things like, I'm not sure if you know words like eduoptimum, which is the Mi'kmaq word for two-eyed seeing, is that responsibility of working together. But also there's another word called nedugalimk. Nedugalimk for us means that you only take what you need, right? So it's that responsibility of sustainability. Sustainability in anything you do, whether it's relationship, environmental, business, whatever it is. So if someone doesn't learn how to operate within those natural laws of those two elements, then the teeter-totter is gonna fall on one end, right? And I think once people understand that and apply that in a tourism sense, then true sustainability and responsibility to that will start happening, right? Well, I mean, the obvious thing is technology, right? The technology can be something that can help us or hurt us, right? It depends on how you use it. For us, if we utilize technology in a way of saving our culture and our language and, documenting and recording what is here now that we know is authentic, that is real, true to our people and our nation, then that's something that can help us in the future.
Well, let me start with, the being at the Africville Museum, you're kind of like cook, bottle washer, advertising, a little bit of everything, which is so much fun. My name is Juanita Peters. I'm the executive director of the Africville Museum. Our mandate is to increase telling the story of the people of Africville, the story of Africville. We branch a little bit into the history of African Nova Scotians and why that story is so unique and so important, not just to Nova Scotia, but to Canada.
For too long, this community's story has remained untold.
I feel like the offerings from African Nova Scotians are very well hidden, and we don't want it to be that way. We have so much to share. One of the things that people don't realize is that the African Canadian experience began right here in Nova Scotia. The first presence of Blacks in Canada was here in Nova Scotia, 1605. And then, of course, those large migrations of Blacks who came after the American Revolution and the War of 1812. When we talk to our American visitors, we say, "We are you." We are you that many years later. We're all connected. We're all coming from the same branches.
The Africville Museum also has a unique resource.
One of the wonderful things is that in part of our offerings, unlike most museums, we have the very subjects that we talk about. So the children of Africville are in their 70s and 80s today. And a lot of them are part of our experience. So we often bring a couple former residents in when we know that we have large crowds coming. And what they share is so much more worthwhile than anything you could read in a book, and even just visiting the grounds. Sometimes they'll walk the grounds with you and give you a little bit of a historical tour on what was where and when, and what life was like for them, growing up as children in Africville. So I think that's a pretty unique offering. We need to be in that story. People need to understand. Let me say this. As Canadians, we're not as good at publicizing and championing ourselves and our history. And we need to get better at that. You know, when I travel the world, I see things and I go, oh my gosh, we've had that and more, right? But there's no big statue memorializing that. We need to understand and celebrate the things that make us unique. We need to understand and celebrate the things that have happened here that are unique. I remember when I suggested the story of the Maritime Colored Hockey League 20 years ago, and people were like, we don't know what you mean. Well, the Maritime Colored Hockey League started right here in Nova Scotia. The Africville Seasides were one of the key teams. It was 100 years before the NHL was even thought of. And even today, there are things, practices used in hockey that began right here. And so you don't know those things unless somebody preserves that history and retells it. So you may know recently LeBron James and Drake produced a movie called Black Ice based on that story. So the contributions made by African Nova Scotians are wide, you know, in the fields of sports, in the fields of music, you know, we just don't look at it that way. But it's really important that we take a deeper dive and say, you know, let's pull this out. This is what people need to be taught, right? You have an opportunity, you have it in you to do these things and be great as well.
So how can we better leverage our unique cultures and communities? Well, it's simple. By giving them the space and support to thrive. By encouraging all of us to embrace the buildings we live in, the languages we speak, and the cultures we celebrate.
Thank you for listening to Place, the Tourism Industry Association of Nova Scotia's podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the work we do to support, promote, and celebrate our tourism industry, please visit tians.org.